because we have the most unbelievable team of journalists at Newsy, and they never get enough credit for what they do. We have an investigative team who actually try to find problems and talk about them. And at Newsy, the reason I'm so proud to be there is because we actually raise topics and we find answers to those problems. And as a result, one of the reasons we've been so successful in the last couple of years is because we haven't gone out to try and influence people into what their opinion should be. We've just been out to inform them. And it's not just been about politics, it's also been about the problems that exist in the world. Another documentary we put out earlier this year is called Blowout. I would suggest anybody to try and find it. It actually won a few awards, and talking about the oil industry in this country. So anyway, so the reason I played that was because content, oh look, it moves. Content matters. And I'm talking about the fact that if you want to exist on the big screen, and that's what I'm here to talk about, and a lot of people know I've been talking about it all week, you can't just put any old dross up there. Like, you actually have to put something up there that's meaningful, something that is going to keep people sticking around. And the reason it matters so much is because this is where people are going. It's really that straightforward. Anybody who does their homework knows that YouTube, Google finally told people a couple of months ago that people spend 250 million hours a day consuming YouTube content on the big screen. And that was quite surprising. And so we made the decision in 2016 to completely pivot our business from being a desktop business, desktop syndication business, owned and operated, and bearing in mind that we started in 2008 as a tablet-first company. That was how we founded the business, into OTT. I tell people quite flippantly that we literally abandoned our entire other business. It's not true. We still have a property, and we still have a mobile app, but we haven't even tried to monetize it. In fact, we stopped deliberately monetizing it about 18 months ago in order for it just to be a vehicle to show people what it is that we're capable of doing. And we focused 100% on this. And it's proving to be pretty successful, but it was also really hard. It's a really dangerous place to go. A lot of people thought that you had to pay to play, but once you're there, you're going to be successful. The answer was no. You have to have the right content, you have to have the right mission, you have to have the right vision, you have to understand the market. And if you don't, honestly, there are so many swear words I want to say, and I won't. You're screwed. And a lot of big people, a lot of big media companies have actually lost a lot of money trying to bet big in OTT. And they failed because they didn't look and think about it first. But the opportunity is really there. Our growth has been rapid. In 2 years, we have gone from being a very small business that nobody really heard of, that we were just about passionate people just wanting to find 60, 80-second stories about what was happening in the world. And during the course of the last election cycle, whilst we were making this pivot, people started to depend on us. And as a result, we became, last year, the fastest growing national news network in the country. Now, that's not difficult because everyone else is just flatlined. So it's kind of, but the truth is that it has been rapid. People are consuming us for an average of 40 minutes a day, which is a slide that's about to come up, so I've already ruined that one. And that's going on about what I was just saying a second ago. But as I mentioned, it's about the content. It's about actually looking at what people want and having your focus groups and realizing that people want both content they're going to consume on demand and stuff that they're going to have in a linear format. About being on the big screen, it's not about actually giving them the Netflix experience necessarily. Netflix, in my opinion, came along and actually sort of ruined the landscape for a lot of people in that regard. They were like, right, everyone has to have a subscription, everyone has to be on demand. No, that's not true. So we started playing around. One of the things that we did to talk about current headlines is whenever you tune into the Newsy app or across any one of your devices, whether it's Roku, Apple Fire TV, Xbox, PlayStation, Vizio, Hisense, Samsung. By the way, my job is to distribute, so I'm just pitching myself here. The first thing you get when you launch the app is you go straight into the linear feed, and the first thing you get is a 90-second update as to the top 3 things that have happened in the world in the last hour. And that shows people that what you're getting is relevant, and it's now, and you should stick around. And as a result, people do stick around, which I think, hopefully, nope, still not the next slide. People do stick around, and that's why we've grown. It's been terrifying how fast. We produce about 10 million impressions a day or more in the OTT space. A lot of it's on Roku, but we also are focusing on diversifying significantly to make sure that we appeal to the right audiences across the board. But again, that's another thing that you want to consider. Like, are you a Roku audience person? Are you a Fire TV person? And what should the experience be on each of them? Because they shouldn't necessarily be the same. And as a result of that and the investments that we've made in that, we've seen really rapid growth, and it continues to grow. And then as a result, we continue to double down. As you might also know, about 2 years ago, we launched a cable network. So Newsy, which sounds interesting for us to do as a digital-first company, but we're in 39 million homes. We're going to be in 45 million homes by the end of this year. And we actually use our cable presence and our digital presence to sell to each other. We offer a very different experience on both. Again, we understand and appreciate the fact that on cable, people are looking for one thing, and over the top, when they've got their remote control in their hand and they're having a beer and they don't, not having to pay for their whatever it is they're consuming, they want something else. But we do tell people who are on cable that they can come and find us on demand, and we do tell people that are on our OTT apps that they can come and find us on cable. And that's been extremely successful. And then as Steve pointed out, we have these little bites that come up. Anybody who consumes any kind of OTT has probably seen something called a Newsy brief. Newsy brief was an initiative that I started about 18 months ago. And it was designed to help elevate the brand and get it in front of people who we didn't want to sort of feel like they were being sold to, basically. And it's done pretty well. It crosses about 5 million impressions a day across the entire ecosystem. And we just give little evergreen little nuggets to people about really cool, interesting things, like penguins run for fun, and dolphins are the only other species that have sex for fun, whatever it is. Like something that's interesting and nice and completely irrelevant in the world of news. We stay away from politics in Newsy Brief, and we stay away from anything that is potentially divisive. But again, as I said, we're not a divisive brand, and it's been the biggest reason for our success. Still not that 37-minute slide. It's going to come, guys. We appeal to older people than we thought, which I think is really fascinating. We're a very millennial brand. We still try to, the average age of our newsroom is something like 28. Every year I have to add that number, but we were founded at the Reynolds Institute of Journalism by a guy called Jim Spencer, who just cared. He was like me, he had terrible ADD, and didn't really have long enough to want to consume a story. And so our goal was to go after the millennial, but actually it's not just millennials who love our content. It's people who are sort of skewing a little bit older as well, which I think is really interesting, because everybody's valuable. Hey, there it is. People stick around. We opened a pop-up shop in DC in 2016 to cover the election. Some people might know there was an election a couple of years ago. Small topic. And we did the thing that we cared about doing, which was just say, this thing happened, that thing happened. And whilst CNN was telling everybody that you should think this way and other people were telling you should think that way, we just said, no, this is just the news. And being owned by Scripps, who acquired us in 2014, it was helpful, because one, I call them like Grandpa Scripps, they're the benevolent granddad who come along and every year give us a giant check and say, hey son, go and do what you want, just don't get into drugs. It's exactly how Scripps has run us. They are the example of the perfect acquirer. They really were. They just said, we're not going to change what you do. We're just going to give you the money to do it better and do it more. And one of the rules that they had was, we're not unpartisan, we're anti-partisan. And when I was at the Dish conference a couple of weeks ago, or a few weeks ago in Phoenix, a lot of people came up to me and they said, so what's Newsy? And I said, well, we're an anti-partisan news network. And everyone's like, oh, really? Yeah, sure, everyone's saying that. All the other brands, all the other people who go left or right say that. And I said, no, that's fine. Look, go and watch Newsy and come back and tell me if I'm wrong. I said it to about 20 or 30 people, and over 3 days, nobody came back and told me I was wrong. And as a result, people are just so happy about that. People don't want to be told what to think. And we stuck with that. And it cost us a lot of money to do so, because it would have been very easy and very fruitful to go after a particular audience. But we just decided, no. We said, fuck that. Like, let's actually give people what they need. And people stick around. 37 minutes for a millennial news brand with 60-second stories, that's actually pretty amazing. And again, that's over the top. That's not desktop. That's people who turn on Newsy and they stream it. And one of the most interesting things that I discovered the other day, thanks to a friend of mine who was going through marriage therapy. It didn't end well, by the way. They're getting divorced. But he was in his therapist's office on a Monday morning, and he texts me, and I'm like, oh God, what's happened now? And he goes, thanks, Fred. I'm here trying to salvage my marriage, and all they're playing on the screen is Newsy. I said, that's actually fantastic. Congratulations. A lot of people run us out of home, and we never realized that until we started looking at all of the IDs that were consuming us. We have an awful lot. I actually I crashed my laptop 8 times 2 days ago, looking at the average session times for every single install that we have on Roku. And a lot of people stream us for up to 4 or 8 hours a day. And it's because, again, they like us out of home. We're just unoffensive. And people come home, and they turn us on. They listen to us in the background, and they make their gin and tonic. They have their domestic. But whilst doing all of that, they're learning about 5 or 10 things. So we've really capitalized on that. So we've kept our stories short. And again, we've kept the experience on over the top the way that people want it. And one of the things that's really important with that experience is nothing to do with that, but is how to feed them advertising. So we're an advertising supported business completely. We are from 2016. We're going to make about 400% X, or 400 times more than we did 2 years ago in the desktop business. And that was one of the things I was going to come up here and talk about. I just remembered what I was meant to talk about, was the reason we moved away from desktop is because we were sick and tired of all the fighting, all the infighting that happens in desktop. Whether, when Google made its change from Flash to HTML5, we all lost our shirts. Whether there was more fraud, we all lost our shirts. Whether it was a shitty fill rate, we all lost our shirts. And we just got sick and tired of that, and we saw this green pasture in over the top. And we saw also the need for good journalism. I'm just now putting the slide in randomly. And it was a success. That's all stuff. Well, actually, no. I mean, this is relevant. I mentioned that we do a different thing in cable to what we do in over the top. We broadcast for 17 hours a day for our cable business, and it's very successful. Like, we keep our content diverse. Our talking heads are extremely diverse. We have a lot of people that you would consider to be a very dangerous kind of individual telling stories, because we're trying to be real. We're trying to relate. We're not a bunch of supermodels going on screen telling people what they want to hear. Like, we're actually telling the stories as they happen. And that was the point in Maternity Deserts and Blowout and a lot of the other documentaries. And I do encourage anybody to go and find our documentaries. They are fucking fantastic. And by people who just care. And so we consider, as I mentioned our cable programming very differently to our over-the-top programming. But they do also tie in, which is good. And really, I mean, I think that's it. We made a big bet in 2016 by shutting down the only revenue stream that we had and focusing entirely on the other one. At the same time, that was when we launched into cable, so we didn't have that as a guaranteed revenue stream either. It was a good decision, but we made a lot of mistakes along the way. And luckily we're a company that encourages ourselves and each other to share those mistakes. So if any of you are interested in getting into that space or think there's potential, my first advice is don't just launch in there. Even the biggest media brands in the world fail when they do that. And talk to people and ask the tricky questions and figure out how to do it cheaply to begin with. Test the water. And you'll find that there is probably an audience there. At the end of the day, there are 100 million people a month actively consuming content digitally on their big screens. And it's a good place to be, but just be careful when you do it. But when you do, there's a lot of reward. And that's it. Thanks.
Freddie, thank you so much. Stay right there. Hold your questions because we're going to, Freddie's going to be joined